Welcome to the Communication Diva Podcast, episode 50. Today's episode is broadcast on the first anniversary of the Communication Diva Podcast. Fittingly, Jen's guest today is podcasting guru Cliff Ravenscraft, who has been instrumental in making the Diva Podcast possible. Normally a man of few words, Cliff has agreed to make a rare exception for today's anniversary episode. Thanks, Cliff, for everything.
I'm your host, Jen Swanson, and I'm here to talk about the art of communication simplified. You know, the root of most conflict is communication breakdown, and this podcast aims to help you to improve your communication skills so that you can succeed in your business and in your personal relationships. So if this is your first time listening, welcome. There are now 50 episodes on a variety of topics for you to explore. If this is your 5th, 15th, or 50th time, welcome back. And I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy life to spend a little of it with me. I hope that what you find here will be of great value, and I appreciate you listening. Today is the first anniversary of this podcast. We launched back on December 10th, 2011. With a very short 10-minute episode where I just basically said who I was and what my goals were for this next year. And truly, I think these goals have been met and blown out of the water. I never could have guessed that all the things that happened this year would have happened as a result of starting Communication Diva. And I'm very, very grateful for all of it. It's an exciting time. And this next year is going to be a very exciting one as well. I plan to set some more goals in the near future and to share them with you in the coming weeks. So to help celebrate this special day, the guest that I will share with you next is none other than the podcast answer man himself, Cliff Ravenscraft. He is a podcast producer, a consultant, a coach, and a wonderful storyteller, and I'm delighted to be able to bring our conversation to you today. Please enjoy. So today I am very pleased to bring to you on the anniversary date of the Communication Diva Podcast, my special guest, Cliff Ravenscraft. Welcome, Cliff.
Well, hey, thank you so much. I am so honored to be here on your anniversary. That is so cool.
Well, you know what? It actually all began because a friend of yours, he's sort of an acquaintance of mine, hopefully one day a friend, Pat Flynn, put me onto your Podcast Answer Man website. So it's quite fitting that you are the guest today because it sort of all began with me meeting you.
That is awesome. I just got an email from Pat. Today's his birthday, so we exchanged some messages back and forth. So thank you, Pat, if you're listening.
Well, I'll have to shout out a happy birthday to him later on. Excellent. Yeah. So for the Communication Diva listeners, now I think I've mentioned you before, but I wondered if you could give a little bit of your story and how you started in this whole adventure of podcasting.
Sure. I love telling my story, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible so as to not lose anyone's interest. But anyway, I got started into podcasting as a hobby. I found out about podcasting from following this guy I used to watch on this cable net technology channel called Tech TV. It was ZD TV in the day. Anyway, his name's Leo Laporte, and I watched him day and night every single week. Loved catching him talking about technology on this show called The Screensavers and various other shows that he was on. After he left that station, I continued to follow his blog, and I know that he had a radio show, so I would check that out every now and then. I would see if I could catch it live or streaming or something like that. And occasionally he would make recordings of that available for download right from his site. At one point, I read something in his blog about this thing called podcasting, where you could actually subscribe to these radio recordings of his radio show, and they would automatically be delivered to you. And I just thought, that sounds like the coolest thing. And this was back in 2005. And I started listening to his show. I subscribed to it, and he started recording some random content just at like little public venues. He'd get get-togethers with other people from this cable network station that used to be on TV with him, and I would listen to it. And he called it This Week in Tech, and which, by the way, today is an entire network of shows at twit.tv, and he makes about $6 to $7 million a year now from that content.
Wow.
So anyway, that's how I got introduced into podcasting. So I started listening to him, and then all of a sudden I found out there were a couple other podcasts out there, and I started listening to Adam Curry, who used to be a video jockey, I guess, on MTV back in the 80s. And he had a show called The Daily Source Code, and he's actually one of the co-creators of podcasting. And so I started listening to that, and I heard about this Catholic priest in the Netherlands called Father Roderick, and so I started listening to some content that he was creating. Anyway, I was just entertained. It's like, wow, this is so much better than listening to the radio.
Yeah.
I can listen to it what I want. I can listen to it when I want to listen to it because I download it and I hit play when I want to. If I need to stop because I just drove to a client's office, I can stop, go work with them, and then on the way home, I can listen to the rest of it. I was in complete control. I loved it. So I fell in love. I started listening to some shows devoted to the TV show Lost. Some people were creating some fan podcast about Lost, and I loved the things that they were saying. And it started to change the way that I did my personal blog at the time. So I started blogging about the TV show Lost and some of the things that I'm hearing, and I came up with some of my own theories and stuff like that. And I started to get a little traction online as a result, and I would call in some of my theories as voice feedback. So this all started by me calling in on somebody's voicemail feedback hotline, leaving a message, and then one of them played my voice on their show. And this reminded me when I was a kid and I heard my own voice on the radio, time delayed, where I called in, I'd like to send out a dedication to so-and-so, and then I'd go and listen to radio, wait to hear my voice for 30 or 40 minutes, and then they'd play it.
Yeah.
So I heard my voice, and then all of a sudden, right after that, the host of the show, his name's Ryan Azawa, he says, "Man, you should start your own podcast." And I'm like, "Ooh, interesting." So I did. I got behind a microphone, and as you can tell, I love the talk. And I fell in love.
That's fantastic, and we love to listen.
So the story, I'll give you the fast forward version of the story. So basically, I start podcasting as a hobby. Within a couple episodes, we get thousands of subscribers as a result of being in iTunes at the same time that iTunes kind of takes on podcasting. Not only that, but we started to get fan email. People were absolutely writing in saying how much they love it. They were asking me to answer questions that were not related to Lost. I created other shows. Before I know it, within 2 years, I already have like 7 different podcasts. I'm recording about 5 episodes a week. And after 2 years, I decided to quit my career in insurance after 11 years and to pursue podcasting full time. Wow. And then in 2008, my annual income went from $87,000 a year as an insurance agent down to personal income of $11,000 for the entire year of 2008. And by the way, single family income. I'm a husband and father of 3 children, young children. So that was crazy, but I knew that this was the right thing to do. And it took me a while. 2009 was a little better than 2008. 2010 was amazing. And 2011, I thought, man, I never dreamed of making that much money. And this year, I make twice as much as I did when I sold insurance after 11 years.
Just from podcasting.
You do
other things too, but it started that way.
It all started through podcasting. None of it would have happened if it wasn't for podcasting. And what I say to people when they say, "Hey, I want to actually make a living from podcasting," I'm like, "Well, how about what you do is you find a way to make a living with products and or services of some type, and use podcasting as one method of building that platform." Mm-hmm. And that's what I argue for. It's possible to make some money directly from podcasting, and I've certainly done that over the years. But I recommend that it not be, your podcast shouldn't be your product. That's my own message.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that drew me to you after I listened to one or two episodes, and I mean, I was in no way a technical person, but I was, fascinated by this whole thing about, what a podcast is, and much prefer to listen to somebody talk than maybe to even read a book, was the personal tone that you have with your listeners, and you seem to be talking directly to the person listening. Which doesn't always happen, I don't think, in every medium. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that connection with the listeners that you have.
Absolutely. One of the things that I like to do is I like to just be who I am. I like to communicate to people in a way that, I'm not trying to be more famous than I am, more professional than I am. So I oftentimes go with this approach of not editing myself. And I don't try to spend too much time preparing ahead of time to make me sound more, knowledgeable than I am. I just come to the recording as myself. And I think that comes through more than anything. The fact that I'm authentic, transparent, and I'm not trying to hide anything. And by the way, I am so full of quirks and mistakes and all of that stuff. And I've come to the place where I'm okay with who I am, and I get behind the microphone and I just share my passion. And I do have a lot of passions, and you're right, I do communicate in a way where you're the person listening. Now, of course, you and I are having a conversation, so I am having a conversation with one person.
Right.
But I recognize that podcasting is a very personal medium. You usually don't typically have a crowd of people get together and say, hey, let's all get together and listen to this podcast together. It's not like television. It's more like radio. And even with radio, there's some radio that it's on and groups of people listen to the music, or groups of people might listen to some kind of informational programming. But when it comes to podcasting, typically people are listening by themselves. And so I keep that in mind. And when I'm talking to somebody, I am talking to one person. What's really crazy, though, and because I was asked recently by somebody that's in one of my podcasting A to Z classes, a student says, Cliff, what do you think about my opening? And he opens it up and he says, hey, everybody, I'm glad that you are all here today. Today we're going to talk about this. And I was about ready to give some critical, some constructive feedback that maybe he ought to consider. Instead of saying, hello, everybody, we're going to, instead of that, saying, hey, I am glad that you're here today. Today I'm going to talk about this. Mm-hmm. And I think that is wonderful feedback, except for the fact if I go and listen to what I say every single week, I go, well, folks, welcome back to another episode. And I'm like, well, folks, wait, that's plural.
Yeah.
And then and it's like, hey, everybody, thank you for tuning in. And I do say everybody. But what's weird is I say that because I do know that multiple people are listening, but I do communicate in a way that I'm talking to one person. Yeah. And I think for me, it has a lot to do with format that you choose if you were to communicate in a podcast. Like, for example, I like to answer people's questions. So somebody will call in and leave a voice message for me with a question. And in that case, I very much am talking to one person. And just like to you, you've asked me a question. Now I'm talking a lot about, but I'm talking to you, one person. And people are hearing that, putting themselves in your shoe.
Right. So it does become very personal. And I know I've had people say, I really like the sound of your voice. I feel like I know you. And I'm sure you get that feedback all the time.
Absolutely. And in fact, it's one of the, I think, the most personal forms of communication is this idea of podcasting, because a majority of the people who are listening to you, number one, they do listen alone. And so that gives a more private relationship type feel to it. And not to mention the fact that a lot of people will listen with headphones or earbuds on. And so not only that, they're hearing you in stereo, and they're actually putting your voice inside their ear canal. I mean, that's pretty intimate when you think about that form of communication. It's closer than sometimes we get to our spouse when we communicate to them.
I never thought of it that way before, but you're right.
It's like that. That is probably one of the most distraction-free listening places that you go. You put the earbuds in, you drown out the rest of the world, and you're listening to that person speak to you. That's pretty amazing stuff.
That is when you put it that way. That is very intimate and very personal. Huh. One of the other questions I had for you about the way that you communicate, not necessarily on air, but I'd like to ask you about the personal ways you communicate with people through email, through other mediums, because I know once before we'd ever actually met, I sent an email and I was quite surprised that I got a personal email back pretty quickly. And I thought, wow, I remember saying to Scott, wow, this guy's like famous. And I get an email back from him within, a few hours. And I just, that just spoke so highly of the way you communicated. And I wondered if you could talk about that.
Sure. Today, where I am now, I reach tens of thousands of people all over the world. I receive somewhere between 40 to 100 plus emails every single day. And I personally respond to every single email, even today. And now it's a little bit more of a challenge now than has been in the past. And there are days when I get 2 or 3 days behind. If I go out of town on a speaking gig or something like that and come back and business, just getting caught up on to-do list, I've been known to be 2 weeks or sometimes at the most 3 weeks behind on emails. But I still do respond to every single person who ever emails me. I do that because what I'm doing here is not trying to earn money, but I really did get into podcasting and leave my career in insurance in the pursuit of building relationships with people and having a position where I can make a positive impact on people's lives. So one of the things that hasn't come out until now, I'll share it with you, is that not only was I an insurance agent prior to going into podcasting full time, but I also was an associate pastor of a church. Mm-hmm. And so I very much see all of this stuff that I'm doing as ministry. Mm-hmm. Anybody that comes in my path, it's not necessarily that they are a quote unquote prospect for me to convert, because I got rid of that mindset several years ago. Yeah. But here's the way that I see it is, if you have come across my path, then I honestly believe that God's given me an opportunity to bless you in some way or to serve you in some way. And if that's responding to an email with an encouraging bit of a response, then by all means, let me take this opportunity and not let it pass.
And that's pretty evident. I can say, speaking for myself, from the responses that I've gotten, and again, this was before we were in the Mastermind relationship and all of that, which has been really life-changing for me. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, bringing people together and communicating with the Mastermind Group.
Absolutely. So basically, one of the things that happened, obviously, I told you I get a lot of email, and some people, it's like, this guy can't be real. There's nobody can answer that many emails. Well, I do have some automation tools that make this possible for me and stuff like that. But here's the situation. When it came to answering questions, one of the things I love about podcasting is I came up with Podcast Answer Man so that I could answer questions one time and answer them for everyone. So one of the things that I do is I found that if you were to send me an email and say, hey, I found your Podcast Answer Man site, and I wonder if you can tell me how can I take in voice messages and play those in so that I can play those in my show like you do. And then I can email you back and say, I'll tell you what, just go over to podcastanswerman.com/voicemail. I really hope this helps you connect with your audience on a much deeper level. Please feel free to send me a link, to share with me once you get your show online. I'd love to celebrate that with you. So it doesn't take very long for me to respond to that, because I've already gone and created that post at podcastanswerman.com/voicemail. So I found the value of, and by the way, I used to answer every email individually. So I mean, if you asked me the same question that the 3 people before you asked, I would actually write the response every single time. But now I know the top 50 questions that I have, and I have a couple canned responses to those, but I never give you a canned response without a personal response to go with it. And 9 times out of 10, my canned response will actually be, you'll get the personal note, and I will even say, now from this point forward, I do want to let you know and fully disclose that what I'm about ready to say following this is pre-written. And I do that because I want to be authentic and transparent. I don't want people to think that I spent the last 2 hours writing this message. Quite honestly, I spent 9 hours composing how that should sound, and I did it once a couple years ago, and now I just use it over and over again. So that's how I do that. Now, when it comes to this mastermind, that's going to your question. I hadn't forgot.
No, that's fine.
So here's the situation. The mastermind is the same deal. I had lots of one-on-one coaching and consulting. And what happened was I found that, sure, there was a lot of people who wanted the technical. They wanted to learn the steps of podcasting. And so I started something called Podcasting A to Z. That's different than the mastermind, but it's an online training course. And I found that I could help groups of people, 20 to 30 people at a time for 4 weeks, and give them all of my attention. And that way, put them in an online forum and allow them to ask questions. I answer them, and all 20 to 30 people see all those questions and the answers, and it keeps me from getting the same questions over and over again. It's a really effective way for me to do consulting. Now, the thing is these one-on-one coaching and consulting calls started to turn into a lot of coaching. It's like, gosh, Cliff, I love your mindset about this. And why did you make this decision to do this? And wow, I love the fact that you switched this to that. How did you find, what tool did you use there? And so a lot of people wanted to know like a lot of business advice and personal development and organizational skills. And man, I wish I had that source of motivation and accountability. And people were paying me $300 an hour just to talk to me on the phone. And the thing is that's great. I was loving it. I mean, no, this didn't happen overnight. Trust me. This was as recent as maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so what happens is my one-on-one coaching consulting schedule is getting out of control. People want to pay me less money, and they want to just talk to me and get some motivation and encouragement. And they're loving it. They say it's worth it, but I don't have enough time to say yes to everyone. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'll tell you what, instead of you paying me $300 an hour 2 or 3 times a month, how about I come up with an organization where you pay $297 a month and you get 2 90-minute calls per month, plus an online forum for you to interact with all these other people. Plus, I'll give you all of my digital training materials and any kind of the new materials that I come up with. You'll get access to all of that, all of it included for $297 a month. And that's what I did. I created it. It's called the Podcast Mastermind, and I invite people to come. And literally, I consider myself to be the facilitator of small groups of people who are there for where everybody's dedicated to the personal and professional success of everybody else in the group.
So there you go, small group ministry, hey?
Here's the deal. I honestly feel, and I take it as though I am the pastor of small groups of a church. Now, I say that, and I don't want to freak anybody out because it's not. Obviously, the Podcast Mastermind is not even a Christian organization. There are several non-Christian people in the Podcast Mastermind, and we don't function as a church or anything like that. But what I mean by that is, you're right. In my role as a pastor in the past, my desire is to serve people, to help people, and to be there for them, to literally to minister to their needs as they desire to receive help. And that's what I do. I'm a caregiver, and I want to encourage people. I've been gifted with the gift of encouragement, and this has been my natural outlet. And the fact that I actually get paid extremely well to do it it's like sometimes I feel like I'm still dreaming, and one day I'm gonna wake up rudely and I'm going to have to go into that day job selling insurance again.
Let's hope you don't wake up then, hey?
That's right. I'd rather just sleep right here.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, having been a part of the Mastermind Group, now, how long has it been? Was trying to remember. Was it March?
We started March 1st of this year, 2012.
Yeah. It seems like forever ago because so much has happened. But, without being part of that mastermind group, I would not have traveled to New York this past summer twice. I would not be going to Vegas. There's just, when I say life transforming, I really mean it. It's something I look forward to, and it's an amazing group of people to have connected with in such an intentional way. So I am truly grateful for the work that you're doing there.
Well, thank you. It means a lot to me to hear those words. And the amazing thing is that, I talked about that year 2008, and I had one or two people who really helped me get through that year. In 2009, things started to really take off, and there was about 5 or 6 people who really helped me see some new things. In 2010, things got insane when it came to how much my income finally took off. And people started asking me, Cliff, how did you do this? Why is it that everything you touch turns to gold? And I didn't even think about it until I started getting that same question over and over again. And then it became as clear as day. It's like, oh, well, duh. I started reading these books and hearing about these people who have these mastermind relationships. And one of my favorite scriptures, by the way, is on my wall, Proverbs 15:22. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, absolutely. I believe that. And so I put that into practice, and I surrounded myself with people. And here's the other thing is another favorite quote of mine is find people. If you want to succeed in life in a certain area, find people who have already achieved the level of success for which you are trying to achieve yourself, and then live in relationship with those people. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did, as I found people who I looked up to, people who I felt were successful in all the areas that I want. And and I'm talking about the biggest, most successful people in that area. And I intentionally set out to develop relationships and friendships with them on a personal level. And so today I'm very blessed to say that I have some some business advisors who are some of the most sought after business coaches in the world. I've got one friend, he gets paid $2,500 an hour to talk to him.
Wow.
And he's a close personal friend of mine, and I could pick up the phone and call him night or day, any time of the week, and he'll talk to me and give me any advice that I need. And I have probably about 7 other people just like that. And those are the people who are my mastermind. And so what I wanted to do with the podcast Mastermind is help people understand the value of coming together and brainstorming your ideas and thinking of things from multiple different perspectives to help you get to the level of success that you want to achieve in life.
It's communication, but intentional communication with the idea of taking things to the next level, one of the lines that you use, moving things forward. And it's very, very supportive also. And I like the way that you're able to keep everybody on track. There's guidelines, there's a format, you're definitely facilitating. And it's a very productive time of communication amongst the members.
Yeah, it takes a lot to pull all of that off, and certainly I try to find ways to improve it at all times. But you talk about communication a lot, and because that's your brand. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up to make sure people know when I talk about success, one of the things that I think is great and that I've learned in life in achieving success is, number one, believing something that is possible. And Henry Ford once said, whether you believe something is possible or if you believe it's not possible, either way, you're absolutely right. Okay, so I love that quote. If you don't believe it's possible, you're right. For you, it is impossible because you'll never take the steps necessary to make things happen. And I do believe that most everything is possible if you actually put a plan in place. So you set the goal. So number one, I believe in believing things are possible, setting amazing goals that seem impossible, but actually believing they are possible. Set them as goals, writing down your goals. And here's where the communication comes in. Telling other people about the goals that you have. Now, remember, I told you there happens to be a gentleman that's one of my personal business advisors. He gets paid $2,500 an hour for his business coaching. I have access to him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if I ever need to talk to him. Now, do you know how I met him? In a podcast I was recording, I simply said, I would love nothing more. Matter of fact, I'm going to set this as a goal right here in this podcast episode. My goal is to interview so-and-so. This is maybe it's a lifelong goal. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I'm just going to tell everybody listening to the show, my goal is to actually interview this person on my podcast, Answer Man podcast.
So you were manifesting him.
Well, I was communicating my goal to someone else, to the people who were listening. That person was on my podcast being interviewed within 2 weeks of me saying those words to my audience.
Wow.
Because immediately afterwards, I got an email that says, hey, I was just listening to your show, and I just want to let you know I happen to be close personal friends with him. He already knows who you are, and he'd love to be interviewed on your show. Would you like me to connect you this week? And not only that, 2.5 weeks later, I was at his house. We went to a show out in Nashville, and I helped him set up a whole brand new studio. And, my financial, course completely changed as a result of that. So when it comes to communication, a big thing, number one, believe things are possible, set amazing goals, and write them down, and then communicate your goals to other people.
Mm-hmm. Because then you make them real.
Yep. And you may not know. Here's the thing. You may not know. You may have a hard time believing how on earth could this be possible, this crazy goal. But you might think to yourself, I don't even know if I can write this one down. And I'll give you the perfect example of this. I have no idea why I wrote it, but I actually had 12 goals going into 2012, and I've achieved 10 of the 12 already. But anyway, 2 of the goals that I wrote down for 2012, I wrote down that I wanted to have my first paid speaking gig. All right. So I've been doing a lot of public speaking, for free at little free events and stuff like that and stuff like that. This is great. I'd like to have one of those quote unquote paid speaking gigs, not to where they just pay for your airline and your hotel. I'm talking about where they pay for your airline, your hotel, your meals, and they actually write you a check for actually coming out. I want one of those. Now, if that wasn't crazy enough, I actually wrote down another goal right next to it. And it says, I want to actually be a keynote speaker. By the way, I have 0 professional training as a speaker.
Right.
And I want to be the guy who opens up a conference and is the first speaker. And it actually says in the program, keynote speaker. It says on my lanyard, keynote speaker. And I want to be that guy who gets up in front of the audience. I don't care how big it is. I want to be the guy who will set the tone for the rest of this entire conference.
Wow.
I want to be a keynote speaker in 2012. There's no way this is possible, but I knew it was a big goal. One of the things that I felt God tell me to do is like, listen, I want you to dream big, and then I want you to understand this is the year of even bigger dreams. So whatever your dream is, I want you to dream bigger. And so my goal was to be a paid speaker, and then I wrote down right next to that keynote speaker. On my bulletin board right next to me here in my office is the name Cliff Ravenscraft, keynote speaker, on a lanyard.
Wow.
And I was paid to speak there at the Catholic New Media Conference.
And how long after you set your goals? Like, when was this? This was...
I set my goal in November, and the conference was in August. But here's now you're talking about, this is all back to the communicating thing, right?
Right.
So I set my goals, and I did a podcast episode, and I talked about the 12 goals that I had for 2012. Well, the person who hired me for the paid speaking gig and being the keynote speaker happened to be a good friend and a listener of mine who was actually going to be planning a conference. And I love Cliff Ravenscraft. I think he'd be a great keynote speaker. Let's get him out here. So within 2 weeks of me speaking my words, communicating them, that person says, oh, dude, we can so make that happen. And I'm like, seriously? Me? And matter of fact, if you go to, I think it's podcastanswerman.com/keynote, you can hear my very first ever keynote speech.
There you go.
And it went great. There's so much about it. Yeah. And I don't think it's just, I read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich and stuff like that. And I get a little weirded out by some of the new age stuff. The word, I don't know if the word manifesting, it's, you make it, happen in the ethos of the of the universe and universal energy and universal consciousness. Some of those things really weird me out. And I don't think that they properly give credit to where, to some of the things that God's put in place. But there's something about communicating to people around you what your goals are. You may not have a full understanding of how things could happen, but if you just communicate what your goals are to other people, they may be able to show you something you're not seeing.
Yeah, and I think too, if you put it out there and you communicate it, as you said, you are making it something concrete, and
Yes.
and there is a bit of an accountability factor once you say, I'm going to do this, and it goes out there, especially if it goes out, over the airwaves to hundreds and thousands of people. But even if you just tell your close family and friends, this is what I want to do, then you've put it out there, and who knows, what will happen after that.
You never know who knows who's connected to who, and so I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of setting gigantic goals and telling as many people what your goals are. And here's the other thing is I believe that you're best able to achieve success when your main motivation is helping other people to achieve success. So in this communication thing, it's not just one way. My goal is to find out, Jen, what are your goals? Mm-hmm. What are the things you want to accomplish? Mm-hmm. And I want to actually not just hear those and let them go in one ear and out the other, but I actually, I happen to know some of your goals. I know your goals of having some coaching clients and stuff like that. And I spent a lot of time trying to find exactly what kind of clients you're looking for. And I'm just waiting for an opportunity where I can connect somebody who has goals of communicating better, who is looking to make a transition from one place to another, or who's having a hard time, in the areas that you're strong in, and actually connecting them to you so that I can help you meet your goal and help that person meet their goal.
Fabulous. Yeah, I see. It is that 6th degree of separation, or whatever they call it, too, isn't it? Someone knows someone else who can be helped. And I know several times I've told people about Podcast Answer Man too, because people have said, oh, podcasting, it's not such a big thing where I am. And so there seems to be this large group of people who have never heard of it before. And then once they hear what it's about, they get all interested, and yeah, very often I've told them about your website and said, go check it out if you're interested, So yeah, I see what you mean. It's communicating and helping other people and serving other people. And I like what you said earlier. You said it a couple times about being authentic and transparent as you go.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think is important for any of us to want to succeed in life, it's not just having products that you can sell and stuff like that. And I think that, obviously if you're looking to make a business out of this stuff, it's important. But for people today, I think there's an entirely different economy of how people make decisions to buy. And it's not just upon the greatest value. But it's a lot of times purchasing decisions today are based upon how much we know, like, and trust someone. Mm-hmm. And I know this to be the case because if you go to podcastanswerman.com/equipment, and I'm not trying to sell anything because I'm going to actually let you in on a secret. I'm going to be totally authentic and transparent with you. If you look at my equipment package, it's $1,600. Underneath it is the list of all the equipment. Even below that is a list of all the links where you could go buy it yourself. It doesn't take a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist to go and do the math to find out that you could save yourself several $100s to buy it all yourself. It's all there. But many people say, Cliff, I know I could buy this all myself, but I definitely want to purchase this from you because I know that you've built yourself in a profit, and I'm looking for ways to benefit you in just a portion of the way that you've benefited me.
So back to relationship.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. All right. Well, I am so glad that we had this time, Cliff. I'm going to put all sorts of info on the show notes today for Communication Diva. I just want to thank you again so much for taking the time out of your crazy, busy, but exciting life to be with us today. And I just wanted to ask if you had one last piece of communication advice for our listeners out there.
My last piece is just understand that if you're looking to communicate better because you're looking for ways to generate income, forget about the money and pursue relationships and serve others. Look for ways to communicate how you're willing to help meet other people's needs, and everything else will fall into place.
That's great advice. All right, so thanks, Cliff. I'm going to talk to you again very soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, take care. So there it was, the first anniversary episode of the Communication Diva podcast, which I enjoyed tremendously, and I hope that you found some valuable ideas for your own success in Cliff's story and in our conversation. Check him out. I'll include links to where you can find him and some of his offerings on the show notes at www.communicationdiva.com. And while you are there, I invite you to drop a line and to wish us a happy anniversary. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I do answer every single email. So please come and say hi. Now, next week, I'll be bringing you an impassioned conversation with visual artist, teacher, and speaker Marilyn Dyer, whose work reflects her concern for the environment and is truly an inspiration to many. So please stay tuned, and until next time, why not double ideas for your own success in Cliff's story and in our conversation? Check him out. I'll include links to where you can find him and some of his offerings on the show notes at